we interrupt our Washington adventure to bring you this special broadcast.
Welcome. We're so glad you found us. We're the Greenshields family. Travel and adventure is a dream that came true in 2021. Circumstances in our lives over the past few years taught us that life is too short. We were tired of the rat race and burnt out. We wanted to do more, live more, and see more of the world our Creator made. In January of 2021, we sold our 50-acre hobby farm, and in April, we bought our 45-foot leopard catamaran we call So Much More. So far, we have traveled over 10,000 nautical miles. Be patient with us as we share our journey. Since moving on the boat, it has been a non-stop learning curve, especially since we had no sailing experience whatsoever. All things are possible, and we hope you follow along. Our goal is to inspire you to do and be so much more.
I'm Wes.
I'm Callie.
Thank you for joining our special broadcast.
First, we go to Hampton, Virginia, where we meet Claire Newport and Linda Ham from Shored Up. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
We're doing good.
On this beautiful Chesapeake Bay
Day, yeah. So, what is it that you're doing, and who are you?
Well, my name's Claire Newbert,
And I'm Linda Ham.
and we own a small ecotourism business called Shored Up. And one of the things we like to showcase are our oysters. And
Okay.
so we grow oysters. It's called, in a cage like this, it's called oyster gardening.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is that we don't have enough oysters in the bay to provide all the services that oysters provide, like an oyster this size, an oyster about this size can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day.
Wow.
And it provides habitat for things, some things we like crabs and eat. Some things annoy us, like these sea squirts that,
Lenny's.
and there's a little blenny, and we have, of course, we have no shortage of barnacles. And so we grow these oysters for restoration purposes.
Okay.
Because we need those benefits. So we'll grow them for Chesapeake Bay Foundation for about a year.
Okay.
And then after a year, we'll put them on a sanctuary reef. There's
Nice.
one here at the top of the Hampton River. So last year we grew about 3,204
Over 3,000.
oysters, just the two of us. And there were a couple other businesses and volunteers right here in downtown Hampton who also grow. We're super grateful for the Downtown Hampton Development Partnership for hosting the permit so that we can do that. And we also, a lot of people think, oh well, then you can't eat oysters, right? And we're like, no, we love oysters. We just want people who eat oysters to recycle their shells. Make sure the shells don't end up in a driveway or a landfill, but instead end up in the hands of somebody who can take those shells and use them to let new baby oysters grow. For example, this shell happened to come from a restaurant. We recycle shells in our restaurants here down in Hampton. And we just, after one of our tours, we took one of these shells from the restaurant. People wrote what they love about the water in the bay on the shells. I see like a tiny bit of green ink on there. And then we put them in a cage to see if we could catch wild oysters. And you can see on this shell, we caught two, one here and one here. And some shells can support up to 10, there used to be one there, can support up to 10 different oysters. And we might have
It
one.
doesn't have to be an oyster shell. This is a clam shell
Okay.
Mhm.
that was obviously recycled, and it was, you could see some of the purple ink on that one, but you could see an oyster has grown there
Okay.
on the clamshell, so it's looking for another hard substrate to land on.
Yeah, these just
So
these
do they
just
make a new shell then?
yes. So the
Given
new
time?
oysters make their own shell, and they prefer growing in clumps like this. Early on in the restoration world, we grew them in single oysters, which is how most of the oysters that end up on your dinner plate are farmed and grown in as a single oyster. This putting something like this on your plate wouldn't probably look so appealing, but to a fish or a crab or the 300 different species that these reefs support, these look awesome, especially after they've had a chance to grow out and get big. So you can see they just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one died, but you can see it's open. But at the same time, that's not such a bad thing because little creatures, little fish, little things love to go in there, and they're protected inside that partially opened oyster from other big critters. Yeah, there's a nice
cluster of them that have grown.
Now, you see, I see those on like the pylons here at the dock and marina.
Yeah.
But they're looking for something hard to land on, and if it's a piece of wood, it's a piece of wood. We've had a piece of wood float up on a dock before, and there was actually an oyster that had grown on that piece of wood. So Claire was going to discard the wood, but of course we got the oyster off before she did. So the whole side of that oyster was just flat like the board.
Wood grain.
In wood grain. You'll see them on concrete pilings.
Okay.
They're looking for something to land on. And
So when they're on the pilings and on under the docks, they're doing the same
they're
thing
doing
that
the
your
same thing in
reefs.
the water as well.
Nice.
And one of the significant things I think about us growing oysters in this area is that, back in the day, Hampton had the world's largest oyster processing plant. You may know that.
Yeah, we read about that.
Mm-hmm. And that oyster pile was right here. So, that oyster pile, and we also have, such a great ethnic maritime heritage here too. We had people like John Mallory Phillips, who also was a successful black businessman who was an oysterman, because back then if you were an oysterman, you were somebody. You were making some money.
Yeah.
Right? This is Chesapeake white gold here. So, anyway, that was great for Hampton, great for them. They did a lot of good things in our community, not so great for the oysters. So all those shells out of the water meant that there weren't enough left for the oysters to attach to. So, we still have that problem. We still don't have enough oyster shell for oysters to attach to. So we try all kinds of other different things, granite and concrete and, all different types of materials to see what they will like to grow on. But these are grown on other oyster shells, like I said, from recycled
Obviously,
from
that's the
restaurants.
best.
Yeah, that's what they prefer. Yeah, that's what they prefer, although they like other things, as a boater, you see them everywhere.
So if anybody wanted to volunteer and help, how would they reach out to you?
They could go through our website, which you probably will have posted, right? And they could also talk to Chesapeake Bay Foundation. They do a fantastic job if you're in the Chesapeake Bay area.
Okay.
And shell recycling and oyster restoration happens in other areas too. If people are boating or traveling, vacationing in other areas, they can also ask, the restaurant, hey, do you recycle your shells? Sometimes that's a great teaching moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even if the restaurant itself doesn't, you can take the shelves and put them in
You
your.
can take them home with you, absolutely.
I
Ask for a
sometimes
doggy
will take a
bag.
doggy bag of shells. They're
Of
like,
shells
okay,
home.
strange lady, whatever you
Right.
want.
mean,
But I'll take them, and knowing that one of these shells can support up to 10 oysters, that's significant.
Yeah.
So
This is the extent of my knowledge, but oysters saltwater or freshwater
that's a
or
great
both?
question. A lot of people wonder that. If they're saltwater, they need salt,
Okay.
a minimum level of salinity to grow. So, the researchers are trying to, grow oysters and breed oysters that can grow in lower salinities too, because we sometimes have so much rainfall these days that our salinity levels can really drop.
Yeah.
And that affects the oyster population. So if they can breed a more resilient oyster, then that'll help as conditions throughout the waterways change. So pretty cool stuff. And right here in this area, we have a lot of awesome research going on. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
ladies.
you. Thanks for asking.
Great questions.
Yeah.
So if you are in the Hampton, Virginia area, you will want to go to Celebrations. It's taking place on Saturday, November 19th from noon to 4 p.m. and it's at the docks in downtown Hampton. And just before we go, we have an important unpaid commercial for you.
Yes.
Good morning. We're here with Mr. Wes Greenshields. He owns the boat SV So Much More. He's a foreign national from Canada, and we're here to talk about U.S. Customs and Border Patrols and his experience with them. So, good morning, Wes.
Good morning.
So, as a marine traveler, what is the protocol for entering the United States?
Well, in theory, you can just sail up to port of call and talk to customs, although I've always taken the approach to call ahead. Last time we entered was at Boston, and there was issues with COVID at the time, so I actually talked to one of the Border Patrol members who specialized in pleasure craft, and she explained exactly what I needed to do. I sent some emails to actually get pre-approved, so that when I actually showed up, they already knew I was coming. They had a pretty good idea what day I'd be there. And when I called customs, they sent a couple of officers out. They checked the passports and pre-approved us for traveling in the States and gave us a cruising license.
Okay, so what is a cruising license or permit?
Well, we were issued a cruising license when we entered Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And what it allows me to do, well, first of all, you have to understand that when I have a pleasure craft in the U.S., the U.S. Customs wants to know where it is, if it's anchored or in port for any length of time. I believe anything longer than a day is my understanding. So what the cruising license allows you to do is to use the row map to quickly type in where you are, roughly what you're doing there, and it allows the U.S. Customs to update their database or assume they update their database to know where you are.
So what happens when the permit expires, as I understand is your case?
Yes. The permit expires after a year.
Okay.
And as a Canadian, I'm afraid I made the mistake of assuming that it was no big deal just to extend it.
Okay.
So when my permit was coming up due for expiration, I called the closest office and said, this is the situation, do I need to come in to get it renewed? And I was informed that no, you had to leave the country and wait at least 15 days after your old permit expired before you could renew a permit. Well, I'm still just a little ways from going over to the Bahamas, but not ready to leave where I was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the officer said I had to come in with the Form 1300 filled out, and I needed to bring it in and get it stamped and pay a $19 fee.
$19?
$19 even. They don't have change, you have to bring it exactly.
Okay.
So that's what I did. I filled out the form when I was ready to leave. I brought it in. The officer there at the time was extremely helpful. Probably drove him a little nuts, but he answered all my questions because I'd never done this before and I try very hard not to mess things up. So he explained to me that what I needed to do was that if I had to stop sooner than what my destination said, or even when I reached my destination, I needed to call the closest customs office and find out what it is they wanted to do. Every office has its own policies. They all have the procedures that they have to follow, but because every office is in a different situation, either with the amount of traffic they have to deal with or the amount of officers they have, or it could just be the situation of the day, they have different policies in place. We ended up stopping earlier than I wanted because of weather, so I stopped in and I called the office, and apparently the office had closed. And when I talked to an officer at a different office, they just said wait for the next day, call them in the morning, everything was good. So that's what I did. I proceeded to call them the next morning, and at this office, he wanted to know what was up. I said I had to stop because of weather. I'd be here for a little while because it was a good blow that we were waiting to clear through. And
blown by
wind.
weather or weather
Yeah,
system.
it was a lot of wind, and the waves were bad. Not something you want to take your boat into.
No, okay.
So that's.
So you called in.
So I called in, and he said, "So you're just at anchor waiting?" And I said, "Yes." So he said, "That's fine." And I proceeded to carry on. When the weather window came, we went to the next port, made an appointment, and went in. The challenge comes is because every office has different policies, and it's not the first time I've seen it, even using the road map. Because every office has what I understand are different policies, some offices are not happy with what the other office did. Thankfully, it hasn't led to anything, but it can be a little hairy when, well, if you can't prove that you talked to so-and-so, you're going to get a $5,000 fine. Or you could be subject to a $5,000 fine. It's tough.
You check in with your form, what is it again?
Form 1300.
Form 1300.
And they stamp it. Some offices I've seen just stamp it. Some offices I've seen photocopy it.
No, I understand from our conversation that they're holding on to your.
Yes, this office is actually holding on to my boat registration
Okay.
until I check out.
That's kind of scary.
It's a little scary, but they make the rules. I'm here as their guest.
True enough. So, all in all, your experience with Customs and Border Patrol has been very positive.
Dealing with the U.S. Customs, yes, has been very positive overall. Most are just friendly individuals doing their job, and as long as you're friendly, I've found that carries a lot of weight.
Okay. So, what are some tips that you would give to other foreign nationals or?
Always call ahead. Whether you're entering the country or if you're in my situation where you need to report where your vessel is, you want to call ahead because every office may have different procedures, or not policies that you need to follow. You also want to confirm the address of the office because there's often multiple addresses in the same city, and you need to make sure you get the one that deals with the port of call for pleasure vessels. When you call, you want an officer's name so that you can reference it in the future when you're talking to other officers. The important thing is to stay calm. Always stay calm. It can be challenging, but it goes a long way to getting the situation rectified.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure, and you have a beautiful vessel. Makes me want to dream.
Well, you dream, Callie. You dream. Have a good night. Good night.
Okay, back to you in the studio.
Welcome back. Thank you very much, Callie, for that informative interview.
All right, well, that pretty much wraps it up from us today. Again, if you are in the that's in Ontario. Just a reminder that if you are in the Hampton, Virginia area on November 19th from noon until 4, you are going to want to go down to Celebration down at the docks, the city marina there. Really interesting what they're doing and trying to preserve and protect and rebuild the Oyster there in the Chesapeake. And if you are a restaurant and you want to get involved, really encourage you to give Short Up a call, get in contact. The information or the contact information will be in the description. We'll provide you with the link. We return you back to our regularly scheduled program. Follow us on Facebook, SV So Much More. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Or join our crew at svsomuchmore.ca and help support us. Be the first to see new content, chat with us anytime, and access to exclusive content. Again, that's www.svsomuchmore.ca.